Welcome to Transformative Principal. This is Jethro Jones. I'm pulling some old stuff out of the vault for you today, stuff that is still relevant, even though I recorded it a while ago for the Transformative Leadership Summit. Were you a listener when I did those? Because they were pretty awesome. So today's episode is from that vault. I hope you enjoy it. I haven't released these publicly, and listening to them again, I cannot believe how relevant they are. So good stuff, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much for listening to Transformative Principal. I am really excited to welcome Amy Fast to the Transformative Leadership Summit. This is going to be an awesome interview because she's going to talk about how to get students' feedback and actually do something with it instead of just giving lip service to the idea of student feedback, as Bob Dylan mentioned in the other Leadership Summit interview that we did. So this is really exciting, and I'm stoked to talk to Amy. She was on the podcast a little while ago, and you can get more information about what she's been doing. But let's start with thanking you, Amy, for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And
excited to be here.
You're currently a assistant principal in McMinnville, Oregon, right?
Correct. Yes, I am.
Good. And you've gone through this process of surveying your students and getting information from them. And let's start with why it's so important to get your students' voice and feedback on what's going on.
Absolutely. Well, student voice has always been something I've been pretty passionate about. I didn't realize that I'd always been passionate about it until I went back and looked at my master's thesis and some of the papers that I wrote for my undergrad, and it was just kind of a theme that was strung throughout. But as a first-year assistant principal, I didn't anticipate being able to dive into student voice quite so much my first year. And what ended up happening was that there was a shooting at a college in Roseburg, Oregon, which is pretty close to home when we're living in McMinnville, Oregon, and it was heartbreaking for students and it was heartbreaking for staff. And I remember going to my admin team shortly after and said, there's got to be something that we can do to kind of get on top of this issue that is proactive and not reactive, more security measures or trainings around school safety and students who are doing okay, don't do these things basically. And so a proactive measure would be to find out how our students are doing, and what better way to find out how your students are doing than to ask them. I'd read articles in the Marshall Memo that talked about putting student pictures up on the wall in the staff room, and staff members who know those students and feel connected to them put stickers on them, so then you can see which students have connections to staff and which don't. But there are a few issues with that strategy. And one, when you're a large comprehensive high school with over 2,100 students, that's just really time consuming. So that's challenging. And two, that's coming from the teacher's perspective. So there may be people that I feel I'm connected with, but we'll get a more accurate measure of that connection if I actually go to the students themselves and ask, are you feeling that connection? So the impetus for the student survey started with safety. We just wanted to know how our students were doing. And from there, we realized we wanted to ask a few more questions. And while we were at it, we could find out a little bit about, academics and their post-secondary hope, for the future and that sort of thing. So that's how it started. And I can't remember the other part of your question.
That's okay. We'll get to that in a second because you gave so much good information there.
Okay.
So first of all, it's great that this started from a student safety perspective and really feeling vulnerable from a tragedy that every time something like that happens, we all in education feel that. And it's especially scary when it's close to home. And what a great response for you to see that and say, let's make sure our kids are okay, right, and see how they're feeling. So I just want to commend you on that, because that's important to be able to do that and then to actually take action. We all want to make sure our kids are okay, but actually taking action is the really cool part of that. So when you have student voice, then you can start to get an idea of what they care about. And you want to know a couple of things. First, you want to know how they're feeling. Two, you want to know if they felt connections with others. And three, you want to know about what their plans were. And knowing all of those things really has an impact. Talk about the impact that that has when you actually know the responses to those queries.
I mean, well, gosh, it's everything, right? Because we're in this business for students. So if we find out the answers to those questions, then we have a pretty clear roadmap for moving forward. And I've talked a lot with staff since we've rolled out the survey about perception versus reality. And it might be true that staff go out of their way to be connected to students, or it might be true that we have all of these practices in place to make sure students feel worthwhile and that they are treated equally. But it doesn't really matter if that's not students' perception. So regardless of our efforts, their perception is their reality. And so we want them to be enjoying school and feeling like they're challenged in school and feeling like school is worthwhile and setting them up on a trajectory for greatness in the future. And so it's all about how the students are perceiving their education and not so much the kind of education we're giving them. So knowing that perception is reality, we took what they said and regarded it as fact, and moved forward. And it was amazing how it really resonated with the staff when you can actually put voice to what the students' experiences are in your building, and you're not just trying to guess at what those might be and throw arrows in the dark trying to tackle those problems. It becomes there's a much greater sense of urgency around the issues when you hear the students' voices themselves rising to the surface, and it's really hitting the mark, because you can look at a data point about regarding an English or a math test and try to analyze why that data point might be happening, but it's nearly impossible to say how is that student's perceived experience in school impacting that, or how is their level of hopefulness impacting that, or how is their connection with their peers or other staff members impacting that. So it just gives a lot more multidimensional picture of what's happening in a school, and it allows you to drill down to the kind of real work that needs to happen in order to make sure that students are able to attend to the academic piece and invest in it.
Fascinating. It's awesome that you can see all that. And one of the things that I think we struggle with in education is being able to actually quantify how many kids are feeling a certain way,
Right.
One of my favorite things to think about is parents who have low incomes in schools that are, Title I schools, and people saying, well, these parents don't care, or these parents they work too much, or whatever. And the reality is we say that because we think we know the answer, but we really don't in most cases. And we may have heard that one person told us they work too much, and that then becomes the story for everybody else.
Right.
And what you're doing is making sure that it's not the story for everybody else, that everybody gets to tell their own story.
Correct. And that was the integral part of the survey too, is not just collecting the numbers, but collecting the actual thoughts and feelings of students as well, which was the bulk of the work that we did when analyzing the results.
Yeah, and I just love the story of that. So let's talk a little bit about that process. So the shooting happened, you got together with the admin team, and then what's the next step in preparing to get the student voices?
So I work with some fantastic people, student, staff, admin. And so it wasn't, when you asked, how did we get buy-in for this? It wasn't, I guess I didn't even think at the time we need buy-in for this. We all thought it was a great idea. Let's do it. So the part that I think was fantastic, but also was probably the most challenging part of all of this, is that myself and the principal went into 75 English language arts classrooms, which took us over 3 weeks to do, and talked to each class for 15 minutes. And he basically told he kind of made himself vulnerable in front of the students and told how his own personal journey had some heartache and trauma involved, and how it was his connections with his friends in school and his connections with the teachers that helped him get through it. And then I I did a little ditty about the research on hopefulness and well-being and engagement being better predictors of post-secondary success than your GPA or your SAT scores or any of those academic measures, and how, regardless of that fact, the most important thing to us is that we wanted their experience to be great, and we wanted to know that they were okay, and that we really did care. And we said, we sit as adults in back rooms having meetings about you guys all the time, trying to figure out how you're doing, but we never ask you how you're doing. So this is your chance to really own your education and tell us what we need to do differently. And we will do our best to do right by you. And we're all kind of trying to navigate this as we go, and we don't know what it's going to look like. But we promise we will read every comment, and we will not punish you for comments that we may not like. And while it will not be anonymous, it will be confidential. So we won't share it with your actual name with anyone outside the admin team. And students were kind of moved by that. I had a student stop me in the hall and say, "You're Mrs. Fast, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "I just want to tell you that we think it's great that you guys are trying to figure out how we feel at the school, because we didn't even realize that admin remembered what it was like to be teenagers. So the fact that it's hard and that you care and you want to hear about that, we dig that. We think it's pretty cool." And so we had a lot of great feedback from students. And actually our results on the student survey, because the Student Gallup poll does a national survey and they measure similar things, and our numbers were pretty high in McMinnville. And so it was a place where we could really celebrate our own successes, but also pinpoint areas and places where we could really grow with our student body.
Yeah, so it would have been really easy for you to just put that on the top of the survey, what the principal said and what you said. Why did you go to each individual classroom?
Well, I think our admin team is pretty good at really trying to walk the walk. So trying to be teachers and trying with students. And so that philosophy always guides us. But as a first year assistant principal, I was walking down the halls, they didn't even know who I was, at the beginning of the year, and I didn't know them. And so, selfishly, I wanted to get in there and meet all these students. And if I was going to be reading comments from them, and of course I didn't memorize all their names and, the 75 classrooms that I went in, but it's just another step at making a large, comprehensive high school feel more intimate. And it certainly made them feel like we cared a little more, taking the time to go in and talking to each of them, because they understand that, we could have busy schedules and that we could have just made a video and put it on the Google form, or just had the teachers read, the directions to students. But we felt that we needed to humanize this, since that's the whole intent of the survey, was to kind of humanize these components of education. So we wanted to do our part and walk that walk. So
a lot of things that we do in education can be made easier by technology, and simpler and more effective and efficient and all that. However, we do need to remember that we are in the people business, and
exactly
working with people instead of, just trying to do everything in the most efficient manner.
Right.
And so,
right.
That's one reason why we're doing a video interview for this, to make this a more real experience, so
Sure.
people can see you and your smile, and you with the map behind you, and me with this sheet behind me, because I got kids running around behind me.
Right. I locked mine outside. So
yeah, well, mine were locked also, but they sometimes sneak out.
Gotcha.
But this is a people business, and we've got to do those things and humanize it, like you said. And I just really appreciate your example in doing that. We do a survey at my school, but it is very much not a
sterile.
Yeah, very sterile. Thank you. That's a good word. And the concern is that we will somehow taint the results if we humanize it. What's your thought on that?
I think we did. I think we did taint the results, because we had done a school climate survey the year prior, and I wasn't there, but we'd taken a subset of students and asked them, and then kind of used that focus group of students to project to anticipate what the larger numbers would be, and our results were a lot better. And I guess I don't mind that, because if a kid can be agreeing to a statement that they feel connected to adults in the school simply by our faces being in their room for 15 minutes, then they are students who can easily connect to adults in that school, or for whom it wouldn't take much to form a connection. So I don't know that the data is that skewed. And on top of that, because they left comments, they had to elaborate on their answers. And no one said, well, since you came in, I put agree because I thought it'd make you feel better. They were insightful answers, and I think that we don't give our students enough credit. They know how they're doing, and if us being in the room for 15 minutes changed their whole perception of their K-12 education, then I mean, they were on the cusp anyway, probably, of doing all right. So we didn't worry too much about that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you collected all the data through a Google form, and you had a bunch of questions. And if people get the all access pass, then they can get those questions as well in a nice form, so they can use them as well. But did you come up with all the questions, or did you use Gallup's questions?
We did not use Gallup's questions, but I used some of the Gallup research to determine kind of what we wanted to focus on in our survey, because we wanted to know that students' well-being was intact, but we also wanted to know that we were doing a good job setting them up for the factors that would make them successful after high school. And it was pretty evident when writing my book that those factors were engagement in school and hopefulness, connection to peers, connection to staff, feeling significant, like you have something to offer your school community, or that people recognize who you are, and just in general feeling safe in your school. So I was fortunate in that I went into this role already having a good idea of what makes a student feel solid in their experience in high school, and that will set them up on a trajectory for success after high school. So then it was just kind of wordsmithing the statements so that we would get the kind of responses we needed. And do I know if it was, as valid or reliable as it would have been had we gone with some kind of national or research-based study? Probably not, but, we're asking the questions to our students, and it's kind of an intimate endeavor. And I guess we didn't mind that, because what we were trying to generate was how are they doing and who's not doing well, and isolate that list of students who aren't doing well, and then literally say, do you know this kid? What can we do for him? Do you know this girl? What can we do for her? So it wasn't for a big data point. It was for some intimate planning and analysis of our own kids.
Great. So let's start talking about that planning and analysis that you did after the fact. And
Sure.
Obviously we don't want to betray any students' confidentiality,
Right.
But we do want to get some insight into how we can start making decisions. So what were some of the things that you saw in the surveys, in the comments, that made you start implementing something different?
Sure. So we looked at the places where we scored the highest, that most students agreed with those statements. And those, I have this here because I knew I'd forget. So those are feelings of hopefulness. Students were super high. Like 95% of our students were hopeful about their futures, which was pretty cool. I don't know if that many should have been hopeful, but they are.
Or if that many adults are hopeful of their futures.
I know. We had a ton of students comment that they felt respected by their peers and felt like they had good friends. A large amounts felt that the school-wide rules were fair and designed to keep them safe. And a ton said that they would be willing to speak up if they felt like there was a threat to their safety. The places that we realized that we could grow, the biggest area of growth was in equity, feeling like they were treated equally and not discriminated against, which and the number one group within that was our girls. Our girls thought that there were issues around being discriminated against with regarding their gender, which was kind of fascinating. And then also connection, and mind you, these were still pretty high. So 76% of people thought there was equity and they hadn't been discriminated against in school. And then feeling like they mattered, like they had something that made them unique and special and significant to the building. That was another area to focus on. And then also having an adult who knows them well and that they can go to if they need something, or they feel like they need someone they can trust. That was another area. And again, those were close to 80%. So with those being the lowest, we were still pretty excited about where we were. So we took our lowest 3 areas, and then each admin took an area. So I took connection to staff, and another admin took feelings of significance, and another admin took equity. And we went through and we took every single comment and we highlighted it by color. So, for example, anything around equity, anything regarding gender would be highlighted in one color, and anything regarding ethnicity would be highlighted in another color. And so we would basically codify how their responses were in order to pull out themes. And then we took those themes and said, of these student responses, here's a large area where our students are really feeling like we're not doing right by them. So then we would have professional development around each of those areas. So, one PD session around equity, and we would really dig into the student comments. We'd take their names off them, but we'd say, here are the students who thought that there was a lack of equity in the school, and here's what they had to say, and kind of pull out representative comments that we had heard kind of over and over and over. And then here's students who feel like there's a problem, or did I say there wasn't a problem? I don't know. And then kind of give representative answers or comments there as well. And we did the same thing with connection to staff and feelings of significance. And the teachers, read the comments, and that kind of gave voice to the feelings and really helped to articulate those themes a little better than we could. And the teachers were really excited about the chance to dive in and really figure out how the students were feeling and know how to tackle those things. And what's cool is, like, when we did PD around connection with adults, it can be overwhelming because you think, man, I'm working so hard all day long, and it's hard to even like hold it together. So how can I connect more with my students? But we took some of the students that had disagreed with the comments, and we asked them if they'd be interested in being a part of a focus group. So we held various focus groups around these topics too, and asked them to explain a little more. Like, you said this in the survey, can you tell us a little bit more about that? And what do you think we could do better as a school to help address this? And the students said things like, just smile in the hall. Like, if every teacher smiled in the hall, that would make a huge difference. Like, sometimes we don't even feel seen. Just look us in the eye. And so it was neat that it's not, a lot of these fixes to these issues are small micro behaviors that happen day in and day out, as opposed to this big initiative that we need to roll out and mandate to staff. It's the little stuff that can make or break a culture, which is it's also the hard stuff, But that's what we found, and I just looked at the results of our spring student survey. And the connection with staff is the area where we focused the most this year, and we grew by almost 10% of students felt that they'd gone from not feeling connected to connected. So,
yeah, and in a 2,100 student high school, you said you had about 80% that didn't feel, or that did feel connected. So
yeah,
that's 400 kids that still aren't feeling connected.
Yeah.
That's the size of my whole entire school.
Yep, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah.
So, and then to have 200 feel like they are connected, that's
right.
Pretty powerful also.
Well, part of what we did is because the joy of technology is then we can take and sort the spreadsheet. And so we also took and found the top 100 students that the most disagrees. They weren't hopeful. They weren't feeling connected. They didn't have friends. They didn't feel significant. And we created a high flyer list, which was basically like, who knows these students? Come to my office, look through this list. Who knows these guys? And we didn't say what they wrote. We didn't say, but just, do you know this kid? And if not, sign your name by him if you know him. And if you're willing to go out of your way to smile, say hi, ask how their day is, those sorts of things. And then after people come in and sign next to, certain names, then we find this small handful of kids that there's no signatures. You know what I mean? And that becomes that real intense focus, like, who are these kids in our building? Why don't we know them? let's rally around and figure out how we can wrap around these kids and get to know them better and what we can do to make them feel like a part of our community.
So that takes the thing that you talked about at the beginning from the Marshall memo about the student pictures and putting
yes,
dots on them. That takes that and just focuses on those kids that are the most disenfranchised with the
exactly.
system,
Yep.
and provides support to them. So were those 100 kids the ones that you had in focus groups, or were you pulling kids
A
randomly?
lot of them were some of the ones in focus groups. So I have an instructional team, which is a group of teachers that meets twice a month, and we just talk about instruction and how to improve instruction in our school. And I had this list of students who would be possible focus group candidates, but I didn't know them as well as the teachers would have known them. So I kind of asked this question, like, of these students, who do you feel would be okay with me asking them to be a part of the focus group, A, and then B, would have, because there were two aims with the focus group. One was to gather information and ideas, but the other one was to turn this population of disenfranchised students into feeling like they're leaders of the school. They're the ones coming up with solutions and ideas to solve these problems. So now they go from being disenfranchised to really owning the issues and feeling like an integral part of making change happen. So we kind of used teacher input to design who was on those focus groups and who would benefit most from being on the focus group and who we could benefit from the most by having them on the focus group.
And so what were some of the changes that you put into place this year as a result of the survey?
We've done a lot around. Our lowest area was equity, discrimination, that statement. And one of the most impactful things that we did is we changed our leadership students normally hold like a diversity week, and we changed it to a unity week. And we stuck with this this theme of student voice. And our leadership teacher, who's phenomenal, I don't know how she pulled it off because it seems super risky, but it was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in a school. So she basically had each class, freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, have a class meeting, and she had members of that class. So we had gang members, we had undocumented citizens, we had transgender students, we had LGBTQ students, we had students who had been bullied. We had just this wide array of students. They stood behind a curtain in the auditorium and they told their story on a microphone. And then they would come around the back or out in the front of the curtain and to a standing ovation by their peers. And every single class, every single person, it happened the exact same way. Everyone in the audience was crying. The person on the microphone behind the curtain was crying. And people would rush the stage to hug the people that had shared their stories. And, I have to commend our teachers, too, because we had teachers that would be vulnerable as well in front of their students. So they would get behind the curtain and they'd tell stories about health issues they had or issues that they had growing up with their parents or issues that they had in school, and they would allow themselves to be vulnerable, and then they'd come around the curtain to a standing ovation by the classes. So it was this just kind of amazing week where our students really came together, and there were no more labels that divided people, and everyone just kind of respected the fact that you don't really know where someone's coming from unless you know their story, and once you know their story, it's hard to feel this divide between you two. And so every time I'd look at social media and see what my students were posting on Twitter, I'd get teary because they would talk about how it was life-changing for them and it was the best thing that they'd ever experienced in school, and how this should happen more often in schools. It was really cool. And that's just one of many things. That's a big picture thing that we did to focus on that. But there were a lot of little day-to-day things that teachers implemented to also kind of focus on that.
And I imagine the reason why that was successful, even though, yes, that would be scary, is that you were doing all those other things to make people feel safe to say
right.
Share their stories.
We'd kind of developed that culture already.
Yeah. And I mean, I was getting a little emotional thinking about what that would be like for a kid who's struggling, and thinking about myself as a high school student, the things that I was going through, how I would have felt really good to be connected. And I love the idea that instead of having diversity week, identifying how we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
You had Unity Week identifying how we can all be one.
Yep. We
And
all have a story. Yep.
yeah, how powerful that is for the students. Well, Amy, I really appreciate your time here today and sharing this all with us. Is there anything you need to add that we didn't get to before our time is up?
Oh gosh, I don't think so. Just that I think it was powerful enough work that we are going to continue to do it every year, and it had a tremendous impact on our students. And we had pretty good test scores this year, and I don't think that that's an accident either. So, all of that is interconnected in schools, and I think you have to focus on the students, the entirety, in order to really figure out why they're doing well or why they're not doing so well in our buildings. And to be honest with you, we have an admin team that cares about them doing well, not as a means to an end, but as the end in and of itself. And I think that needs to be your mindset in order to do this work and really sell it and to walk the walk. So.
Yeah, well, that is awesome. Amy, thank you so much for being a part of the Transformative Leadership Summit and being here. I know I've learned a lot from you, and I know that everyone watching will as well. And so if you want to watch this later and get some more ideas, and you'll benefit from watching it again, because she went pretty fast through some things.
My last name.
That's right. So you can get the all access pass and get all the questions that she gave as well. Thank you again, Amy, for being here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.